Don't sneak up on me like that. Well, as you can see, I've left the house and gone outside again. But at what cost? It's Wednesday, my dudes, and summer. This is my summer fit. All gray, because I'm rejecting chromatic contamination that might endanger my stable mood. Gray backpack, new solar backpack, by the way. New gray water bottle, my sippy cup. Got this little retractable USB on the outside that can connect to my neck fan, which you may have spied a moment earlier. And just plug the neck fan directly into the backpack and run it off the solar panel all day long. Nice to have. I give a couple weird looks, but I do anyway. The shoes aren't gray. That's going to have to change. I'll have to pick up some of these in a more suitable color. Although, if you think about it, black is just dark gray. More traditional content is on the way. I'm still working on cleaning up the double-decker habitat towers. Still working on building the aqua level, which is about 50% completed. It relies on a part that hasn't been made for about 12 years, so I'm having to wait for that to pop up on eBay. Let's see, in other news. A bunch of you subbed to my Substack. Thank you, I really appreciate that. I went from making like $5 a month off my Substack to 50, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it means something to me that I made that from my writing. So thanks for that. Anyone else interested? It's $5 a month, all access. You can sub, read everything, and then unsub if you like. Some more of that good stuff is coming. My audience seems divided in what content they want, though. Some of you want more habitat stuff. Some of you want more cars, the escape pod content. And some of you have been urging me to do more of these little just sit and talk videos to get to know me better, to give you a peek inside of my noggin. So I thought I would do that after the warm reception to the last one, the Ravings of a Lunatic. There's going to be more of that coming. Probably audio narrations of my horror literature, because my publisher is supposed to do that, but they're kind of dragging their feet. They got their hands full with a bunch of other projects. But that's on the way. I can't really wait for them to get on that anymore. I have to take some initiative. AI voice software will undoubtedly be an enormous help in this endeavor, just because I can have a wide variety of voices, male and female, all accents, without having to pay voice actors, which I can't really afford to do where I am right now. So stay tuned for that. That should be pretty cool and a learning experience. Until then, here's my usual annual camping video. You might get two this month, actually. We'll see how that goes. But in this one, I head up into the woods of Washington to stay at a cabin generously offered to me for 3 days use free of charge by a dear friend of mine. Things get a little silly when I eat some special paper, as one does. And here's the footage which resulted from that dubious life choice. Well, here I am in the acceptable outdoors. I can't call it the great outdoors. Disney copyrighted that in 1990. I was going to stay in that little cabin over there, but there's been a fire apparently. So I get to be upgraded to the big cabin. Now, GM calls the Volt a hatchback. That's really generous. It's a sedan. It's by no means suitable for off-roading, yet I had to do quite a bit of off-roading to get here. It was dicey. Amusingly enough, these mountain roads weren't the problem. The problem was the gravel logging roads, which had potholes big enough to drop a big fat guy into. And here I am willingly entering, of my own free will, into a remote deep woods cabin, which is how a bunch of scary movies start. If I was a big-tittied co-ed in like panties and a tank top, I'd really be inviting my own death here. Although, I may be anyway, we'll see. Just by putting myself into this situation. I'm potentially more fucked than the OceanGate sub guys. And they're as dead as anyone ever has been. Maybe deader. This is actually really nice. There's no electric lights. There is running water, thank goodness, so I can fill up my solar shower. There are appliances, so eventually there's going to be. As an interim solution, the person who owns this property, who's letting me stay here, purchased a solar power kit, and I advised them strongly against lead acid. They got lured in by the siren song of the cheap upfront costs. There are some lessons I guess you have to learn the hard way. Like when I took my car through the car wash with my rooftop cargo carrier on and it fucking ripped it off the top of my car. I can't explain that. I have been through that exact car wash 100 times. That has never happened before. Apparently there's like a rising and lowering spinning brush thing that wasn't working and it was stuck in the lowered position. They warned me. I didn't listen. I thought I knew better. There's a language barrier involved. So I don't know if a car is really an escape pod anymore. That was an $800 cargo carrier. That's not small money for me. I bought it when Bitcoin went crazy, and I thought it would be a good thing to have when I was broke, and it was. It's just very flimsy. Mistakes into miracles, like that SpongeBob DeviantArt picture says. Maybe I can take this as an opportunity to build that solar-topped carrier I was thinking about, because I'm not I'm not buying a solar-top carrier. Have you seen the prices? For like a shitty one with 30 watts that'll charge your phone over USB, it's $1,500. And for one that actually makes useful power, like 180 watts, that will connect to an Anderson connector, therefore output 12 volts, is like $4,000. And for one designed for vans that produces more power, yet it's $8,000. So that's nearly the price of my car. That's not happening. Anyways, I'm just going to go unpack and move my things into this lovely little cabin of death. Further updates as events warrant. Oh, fuck, bros. I didn't even notice. There's a fucking attic. You know I'm going up in there. I'm finna get triple murdered up in there. Triple kill, an unprecedented combo. Oh, and there's the solar power system. I'm about to lose it. There's a fucking crawl space too. You just fucking know. On God, there's some spoopermans out there just waiting to pop out. I don't mean to stereotype. I mean, they're proud and industrious people, but spooperman can't fucking resist popping out. Boogity boogity boo! Huh. Spooked ya. The sun has gone down. It's pitch black in the deep woods. If the skinwalkers are going to come for me, this is when they'll do it. They thirst for butt pleasure. Fuck. If I saw a face outside those windows, I would fucking blast terror turds in my little panties. Time to play IRL Darkwood, I guess. Hooray, I survived the night! The sun has dawned upon a glorious new day here in Washington, to the extent it ever does. So far as I can tell, 0 new lanes were added to my Hershey Highway as I slept by skinwalkers. Had a light breakfast of Amari applesauce, and I'm about to have this cocoa. It's not great. It's not like what your first choice would be at 7-Eleven. If you watch my Emery video, you know what's up with that. I'm too hard on Emery stuff, though. It's kind of a minor miracle. It's like the engineering that goes into that is space age. It pretty much is astronaut food, except for guys who will never go to space except as ghosts. It also tastes better the longer you're out in the wilderness. I guess hunger is the best spice. At this point, I would rather eat ass, though, frankly. Although, according to the Bible, life is really more about the ass that you don't eat. No word of a lie, though. I do appreciate the honest and forthright packaging. Raisins! I wonder what's in there. I want to see one of these that says contains peanuts, like an allergy warning, and you open it and it's just peanuts. It reminds me of a no-name brand in Canada. Any of you Canada bros know what I'm talking about? It's like those yellow containers where the only branding on the outside is the name of what's inside of it. Like what Werner Herzog probably eats. Boiling up some water in my little collapsible 400-watt boiler to make that cocoa. You absolutely can do a bunch of different kinds of cooking on battery power if you have this much battery. And I suppose, even though it's lead acid, since there's just so much of it, the fact that you can only use half of it isn't that big of a deal. Now, when solid-state batteries start filtering down from electric cars into consumer products other than cars, like portable power banks and whatnot, it'll start making a lot more sense to do that kind of thing on battery power. You can now, it's just a question of should you. With solid-state energy density, we can really start to use batteries in the way that we've historically used fuel when going outdoors. Now the choice. Milk chocolate cocoa beverage powder? Or chocolate hazelnut beverage cocoa powder? This is a trick question. It's like if when you die you have a choice between regular heaven and pie heaven. You always choose pie heaven. Because it could be a trick, but my God. What if it's not? I've got this cute little backup boiler, which is a little bit more modest than the other one. Stainless steel, I like that. Runs off of even less power. I think it's 200 watts. It'll boil this much water in 6 minutes, excuse me. And that's just enough to make one of these. It's got this nice little magnetic cup lid. It'll run very happily off my Jacker, even though it only has the 300 watt output. It's out there trying to charge in the beautiful Washington sunshine. Fuck, so I read the instructions after making it. I went with the hazelnut, by the way. Classic Hamdad move. Turns out they're chemically self-heating, so by adding boiling water to it, I made it hotter than the fucking surface of the sun. Honestly, though, not bad. And just think about how many billions of your tax dollars it required to take these meals from awful to not bad. I'll keep both of these. It's nice to have backups for your backups for your backups. I like them for different reasons, though. I like that this is stainless steel, very easy to wash, very hygienic. It'll never rust. It boils pretty small amount of water, though. This boils way more water. It's collapsible, and it's plastic, so microplastics will get into the water as you're boiling it and cripple your sperm, among many other undocumented benefits. Not mine, unfortunately. My swimmers are like Michael Phelps if he was the Incredible Hulk. Damn my unprecedented virility! Here's the generator. It is propane powered, purely propane, not a dual fuel. Based on what, you ask? Propane, of course. Idiot, you sexy fool. How dare you? Propane makes way the fuck more sense for emergency backup power than gasoline. I think the only reason gasoline generators are so widespread is because it shares fuel with your car. We should have propane cars too, and I know I'm sounding like Hank Hill. He had a point, though. The thing is about propane, besides being clean burning relatively, gaining in efficiency because of that, because much more of the fuel is combusted, it keeps way the fuck longer. It keeps for 30 years, whereas gasoline keeps for 2 months? Or 6 months if you put preservatives in it? That's insane. Why does anyone own a gas generator? If you're looking to buy a generator, make it a propane one. There's a company that makes single fuel generators that are optimized for propane, and they gain significant efficiency for that, which compensates somewhat for the fact that propane is a less energy dense fuel than gasoline. It's frustrating to me, but for cooling it's really hard to beat just putting ice in a box that's well insulated. It's weird to think about ice having energy density, but when it comes to its capacity to cool, it's really fucking hard to beat, unless you use a phase change gel. But this makes way more sense than doing it electrically, if you can help it. There are entire buildings in New York that are cooled by ice. They freeze big vats of water in the basement during the night, and then during the day they basically just run coolant loops of water around the ice cores, and then they circulate that up through the radiators. Compare that to this thermoelectric nonsense. Anyone who knows me has probably heard my rant about thermoelectric generators, Peltier coolers by now. Peltier junctions are fool's gold. They would be so fucking amazing if they were high efficiency. They're stuck in 5% efficiency hell, which is good enough that if you have a really well insulated box, you can still use them as cooling elements for these little travel coolers. That's what most of them are, even if they're advertised as fridges. I feel like a crazy man when I wax poetical about how good and amazing high-efficiency TEGs would be. The thing is, like any other semiconductor, they're reversible. And you're probably thinking, wait, what are you talking about? Solar panels are semiconductors. They're not reversible. They are. They actually are. You can put power into a solar panel, and it will make a small amount of light. It's just optimized to go the other way. Likewise, LEDs are optimized to produce light, but they also make really shitty solar panels. TEGs are the same way. You can put electricity into the Peltier junction, and it will move heat from one side to the other, getting warm on one side and cool on the other side. Or, if you have a pre-existing thermal differential, something hot on one side and cold on the other, it will generate power. It works both ways. Can you imagine all the uses for that? I feel like Bill Gates trying to sell people on computers when the only home computers were like those Altair kits. Just as an example, think about all the places in a car that produce waste heat that's hard to capture the heat from with the car's normal coolant loops, that you could harvest heat and put it back into the battery. Or imagine if we could make them flexible. Imagine a garment, like a suit you could wear that can warm you when it's cold, but also can function as portable air conditioning when it's hot. Or can generate electricity from your fucking body heat. It's amazing! So if you're a young engineer out there and you're listening to this and you're trying to find your direction. Something that hasn't been done already. Potentially really lucrative and revolutionary. Improve TEGs, I beg of you. Even just tripling them to 15% would unlock so much cool shit. That's the thing, they're like a tech tree unlock, and it's at a junction in the tech tree. Where solving this one bottleneck will unlock so much other cool shit. As evidence of that, think about the fact there's plenty of heated jackets. Because making heat electrically is easy. Any electric circuit wants to make waste heat, so an electric heater is just like an intentionally inefficient circuit. But now, think about what are your options for cooling yourself. There are no wearable coolers. What's the smallest, like, refrigerator pump? I think Adam Savage on Tested made a refrigerated coolant loop, like, flight suit thing. And the smallest one was developed, I think, for the war in Iraq. There was a government-funded program to develop a refrigerated vest. They just couldn't get the pump small enough, and it was really energy hungry. A TEG does all that with no moving parts, if you could just fucking get the efficiency up. Why does it have to be so easy to make heat electrically, and so fucking hard to cool anything? I know I rant like a crazy man most of the time, but I also turn you guys onto a lot of shit way before it happens. Like, remember years ago, I made a video about how deep sea mining was going to be the new gold rush, and look at those chickens come home to roost. Actually, Stockton Rush was hoping to get in on that. I don't have a crystal ball. What I have is a really basic heuristic for predicting new technologies, which is that anything that enough people want, that the laws of physics don't absolutely prohibit, will eventually exist in some form. It's in question how widespread it will be and what it will be used for, but it will be achieved. It's achievable. Very often, the physics of what we consider new inventions was worked out decades or a century ago. The first spin gravity space station was, I think, designed on paper by a Russian in the 1930s. So all the math is already done for a lot of these things. Just a question of stuff like waiting for industry to catch up, waiting for material properties to improve so that you can achieve some of the tolerances you need to make an actually usable product. I don't think I really captured the synergy, though, between all the different semiconductor-based technologies. They're all just basically layers of like metal and glass and other materials. So you can sandwich them, you can stack them. Imagine an unfolding shelter that's like a origami lantern, where each of the walls is on the outer surface a solar panel, but it also has a flat layer of solid-state battery to store the energy. Then it has a flat layer underneath that that's thermoelectric that moves heat from the inside to the outside, or the reverse as needed. On the innermost side, it has an LED illuminator strip to provide light to the interior. And there's a TEG-based water heater as well, all built into the structural walls of the shelter. Do you see the wow factor of taking what used to have to be like machines, like heat engines and whatnot, and turning them into solid-state materials that you can build stuff out of? I mean, forget buildings or clothes. Imagine building a car out of an outer shell that can do like 4 or 5 different things. If you read a lot of hard sci-fi, you probably know about a concept called computronium, which is computers as like a material. Like, imagine spraying computer onto a wall and having a computer wall. Semiconductors are like computronium, but for energy generation, storage, heating, cooling, and lighting, which are all the basics that you need to live a comfortable and dignified life. We're going to get to where printers can do it too, where you can print out the different alternating layers of metals and other materials to just print huge sheets of utilitronium. It's like a utility material that does everything. Having said that, there's not a semiconductor solution for everything. There's not really such a thing as a solid-state motor. That's a self-contradictory idea. There's not really such a thing as semiconductor-based wind power, like without any moving part. Kind of, actually, come to think of it. Piezoelectrics, which are really kind of just pointless frivolity. They have to cover an enormous surface area before they generate any useful amount of power. Perhaps you've seen demonstrator projects where they put piezoelectric floor tiling in like a train station to harvest energy from the public's footsteps. I guess if it didn't cost any significant extra amount, you could put a piezoelectric film on solar panels and harvest energy from like raindrops or something. If any of you watch Star Trek, and I know some of you probably do, the Federation uses phasers very stubbornly, even though there are much better options like disruptors. It does this for a philosophical reason. The phaser can be used as a tool, as a cutting tool and a heating tool, in addition to being useful as a weapon. even though disruptors are much more effective as a weapon, but that's all you can use them for. So they just kind of swallowed the inefficiencies inherent to sticking with phasers and just developing them as far as they could as just the cost of doing business. And for me, that's kind of the basis of trying to do everything without moving parts. Because if you can meet all your needs without moving parts, then you can live without the need of systems, the complexity of which exceeds the ability of one person to reasonably attend to them, which is where the requirement for the existence of modern industrial society comes in. If instead you can subtract moving parts wherever possible and just crush everything down, all of the power and amenities of the Industrial Revolution down into a simple form that will wear out over time and require replacement, but very slowly compared to things that rotate or have gears and belts and fluids and whatnot. Yeah, that's the philosophy behind it, though, is just trying to have as many of the good things from the Industrial Revolution as possible without having to also accept industrial society and the grid and municipal water purification and electrical generation and whatnot. It seems possible, at least in principle, to meet many of those needs as materials, if that makes sense. That's why you might, if you're like me, just accept the consequences, the downsides of trying to do everything without moving parts, because of what you stand to gain from it. And what this is a primitive version of. Just imagine all of this was in the panel. And that the panel also was air conditioning and heating and illumination. Fucking watch this space. It's going to turn out that there's a solid state form of desalination and hydroelectricity that's generating power from humidity differences, and a means of extracting moisture from air that doesn't require moving parts. At which point you could just fucking print out a sheet of this shit, fold it into a shelter, drop it in the desert, and it would have habitable conditions inside and produce the water you need to drink. Unless I'm mistaken, which I might be because I'm fucking blasted by this point. Piezoelectrics are reversible too, so on top of being able to flex them and get power out of them, you can put power in and cause them to flex. So it's not a motor exactly, but you could build like an ornithopter without any moving parts technically, except flexing wings, and maybe supplementary like ionic thrusters or something. Again, no moving parts. You wouldn't, but you could. So I'm just imagining like communities of paper-thin utilitarian desert domes with a travel network of solar-powered ornithopters between them. How's that for some cutting-edge solar punk futurism? That's my vision for a better future, not forcing people together into 5-minute walkable cities with an even greater concentration of power and dependency. I'm not gonna film myself right now, because I probably look like a disgrace, like drunk David Hasselhoff eating that hamburger. But if you can think in the same direction, if I'm making any sense, off-grid technology is already really good. And if a few key technologies, like economical desalination and water accumulation out of the air, pan out, then more and more people are going to be able to exist outside of interdependent societies. The problems of land shortage are then solved because you can live comfortably in the desert where land is cheap. You grow most of your own food and you trade it with neighbors, and life is good for most humans, I think. Just imagine when someone solves water filtration and purification in solid state form. Build it in the material. And realistically, in most applications, you'd want these functions separated, but you could have them all built into the shelter or your clothes or a vehicle. So you could have like one corner of your home just dunked into salt water, like an ocean inlet or something, and it would be constantly absorbing water out of that and desalinating it for you and filtering impurities like a living organism. That's the real next level shit, like solving the housing crisis by genetically engineering a house plant. I mean, like literally a plant that grows into the shape of a house. Can you imagine what that would fucking do to landlords if you could grow a house? Or even if not houses, clothing. That would do to the clothing industry. That seems feasible, right? I mean, genetically engineering a plant that produces leaves or leaf material in the shape of a shirt or pants or something. And once you separate it from the tree and start wearing it, it dies and toughens into dried plant leather. Can we talk about how well solid-state batteries are turning out? I was really conservative about them, actually. I didn't think that there would be a significant improvement on lithium-ion in terms of energy density. I figured as long as they don't catch on fire when you puncture them, and they last 4 times longer, that's good enough. That's enough of a benefit. But it's looking like out of the lab and into production, about a 50% energy density increase is going to be realized. That's insane. That's making possible electric car ranges in excess of 700 miles. I remember, like, in 2008, The early days of the modern EV movement, arguing with guys that one day there would be 1,000-mile electric cars. I mean, not that they would sell you one, because nobody needs that much range, but that it wouldn't be a technological limitation of batteries anymore. And they're like, no, look at this chart, show me a chart comparing the energy density of liquid hydrocarbon fuels to batteries. And I was like, yeah, but electric motors are 95% efficient. Internal combustion engines use like 15% of the energy and fuel to move the vehicle. In a cold climate where it uses the rest of that energy to heat the cabin, it's not that dismal a proposition. But the point is that you don't need to get anywhere near the energy density of fuel in order to exceed its range electrically. You only need about 1/6 the energy density of fuel in a battery to do everything fuel can do. It doesn't matter that those guys couldn't believe it. It's like that 1930s spin gravity space station. The engineering and the physics said that that could be done, and that has a much greater influence on what's possible than what people are able to believe. It's a couple hours later, and I'm recharging all this solar bullshit. You know what happened with this one? I guess I brought that on myself by trusting Amazon, which is little more than a reseller for Alibaba these days. It said 10 watts in the product description. If you scroll further down the page, in the details it says 6.5 watts. And then you know what it says in the documentation when it gets to you? 5 watts. I half expected it to be 3 watts when I tested it. Jackery really does what it's supposed to, though. Everybody swears by these things because they're top quality. What you're paying for is really the customer service, though. There's like 101 Chinese knockoff power banks where you get more capacity for less money, but they won't talk you through issues over the phone with it, and the build quality isn't quite up to trim. I set this thing up this morning when it was 17% from running my heated blanket overnight, keeping my Tootsies toasty. It is now up to 31%. Slowly but surely. Solar really works if you have a lot of it. That's the thing. A lot of people buy those little cheap novelties, the power banks that have PV in the back of them, and they don't get good results from that, expecting to somehow squeeze more energy out of sunlight than is present in the sunlight. And they conclude solar shit. I guess most people are over that by now, though. You just have to have a huge surface area. It's almost frustrating how good it is, because solar is boring. It's OP and boring. I don't want the future to just be big black rectangles and power banks powering everything from buildings and vehicles and whatnot. The heart wants what it wants, and I want fancy and practical bullshit. I want some sci-fi made-for-TV movie shit with like spinning metal rings inside of metal rings and some kind of ambiguous green glow from somewhere. Some kind of like unobtainium reactor. I don't know. You know, it looks like all the engineering trends converged on PV, because that's what makes sense, is indirect fusion power. I turned the music off because I don't want to get copyright struck, but one of the reasons I'm not too tore up about getting lied to, or the wattage on that backpack, is that 5 watts is still honestly plenty to charge a smartphone from if you're slow charging it. This thing can't have more than 5 watts on top of it. It self-powers entirely from solar. As you can see, the battery is dead. It's been playing music for the past several hours just on direct solar power, and it's also got enough left over to charge my phone at about 300 milliamps. It's almost tiresome how fucking OP it is. I mean, that's not great, 300 milliamps. That's about what my little Stirling generator puts out, but that's on top of powering itself. This isn't even like meant to charge your phone. This is some Bluetooth speaker I got a couple years ago. It just happens to have a USB port on it, and I thought, if I'm going to own anything, why not make sure it has the solar panel on the outside of it if I'm going to use it outside, because sunlight is free. I would have to be stupid not to catch and use that. I've never patented any of this. I've never patented any of my ideas. I think because that would constitute trying to live. It'd be an intentional step towards trying to create a future for myself beyond the next few years. I planned for failure for a large portion of my adult life. The whole car as an escape pod was, I think, symptomatic of that. Trying to efficiently plan for how to live in my car rather than figure out how to not have to live in my car. And having the rooftop cargo carrier get torn off because I'm a dumbass and I trusted a car wash was sort of a wake-up call, because I couldn't afford to replace it. And I thought, what's wrong with my life that I can't afford to replace a rooftop cargo carrier? Isn't that a better focus point for my attention than like hyper optimizing my plan for failure, which is what the whole being in my car game was. It'd be easy to offload this onto socioeconomic stuff happening that's outside of my control. Like a lot of people are feeling uncertain about the future right now with AI taking jobs and whatnot. But really, this is more of a personal thing. Even if it wasn't for that, I don't feel like I've been very invested in myself, in my personal brand, and in building a future for myself into old age. That ends now. At least that's my aspiration. Stop planning for failure and stop optimizing the rearrangement of the deck chairs on the Titanic and actually start trying to make it not sink. I don't know why it hasn't occurred to me to try that. It's just been a foregone conclusion that my life is a sinking ship, so it doesn't matter if I spring a few leaks here and there, which is why I've been ignoring my health problems. That's not normal. All the coughing and respiratory issues, that's not a cost of doing business. That's not something I have to put up with. Being up here and breathing fresh, clean air, feeling my body react to that has clued me into what's possible. A better life is possible if I allow it. The elephant in the room is the reason why I kind of refused to plan a future, because I didn't feel there was one for a long time, which is my sister's death in 2018 and the death of a dear friend, Laura, in 2017. Before that, I don't mean to get emotional on you guys. It's not what this channel's for. This is the funny internet hamster man channel. What a hell of a thing that is, though. How can that happen? How is that allowed to happen? You're like halfway through processing one thing, and then a whole other thing fucking explodes like a bomb in the middle of it. I was already at capacity. It just broke me. I didn't know anything could do that. I don't mean to sound like a privileged, naive, sheltered person. I know shit like that can happen and happens all the time to other people. And that can just happen. Nothing prevents that. We're not protected. I don't know why I had like a feeling that shit usually works out for the best. There's no guarantee of that. There never was. Shit can just go seriously, perversely wrong in really ugly ways. And there's no silver lining. There's no like takeaway or lesson or relief valve. There's no message. Just that life fucking comes at you and can be just a horrible, ugly bastard sometimes. Nothing you can do about it. Cut out all the ugly crying. Man, I'm one emotional bitch today. Walk around a little bit, shake it off. Doesn't take a genius psychotherapist to figure out that I self-sabotage in protest. Which, saying that out loud really drives home for me how stupid it is. What do I accomplish by that? It's like that Pokemon meme, it hurt itself in the confusion. It feels right, but I don't know what I'm trying to do by doing that. It's not what either of them would want. I know better than that, I think. There's this other thing I do which probably isn't healthy either. When I get like this, I sort of hear voices shaming me for being self-pitying. Boo-hoo-hoo, a blue, blue, blue. Blue, you've lost people. Fuck you! Fuck you, everyone's lost people. Your feelings are nothing. They're not special. They matter to nobody but you. I don't know why I do that either. What does that accomplish? Man, this is going to be cringe later. That's alright, I've made peace with being cringe. I think the most cringe thing of all is trying not to be cringe. And more broadly, that trying to prevent any chance of having your feelings hurt prevents you from having a bunch of really potentially nourishing experiences. Sometimes it's okay to just let your feelings be hurt and to feel that. It's part of what I think we're here to do as humans. Not to just experience the upsides, but the downsides too. It would be an infantile diet if you ate nothing but cakes and candy and never tasted anything bitter, by which to know how sweet they were, by contrast. In the same way, I think one should not wish to have a purely happy life, and that to live such a life is to have a stunted experience, inhibit your personal growth, I think. I wonder why you don't see more of that in politics and whatnot, where people are trying to humiliate one another. Someone to just be like, alright, you got me. You hurt my feelings. That's what you set out to do. Mission accomplished. Now what? Why did you want to do that? What is it about me you don't like? Maybe we can come to some kind of understanding. What would someone even say to that after they had set out to hurt you and got what they intended? To just catch them off guard by bearing your soul at them and being a raw, unfiltered human. Ugh. I think that's most of the tears out now. There's still some stragglers coming out of the corners, but that's mostly the drugs doing that, I think. Which is quite problematic. Because I'm going to need to start cooking dinner soon, and I can't do that if I'm crying. Man, that's tough, though, isn't it? You can think that you've completely overcome something like that. You've rebuilt yourself completely solid to the core. Because you've completely processed the whole thing and put yourself back together. But then randomly, just some random memory you'd forgotten about creeps in at the edges and just pries you apart from the inside. Like none of that processing ever happened. You can never get them all either. Like they're pests or something, like you're an exterminator. You always miss one, and it'll creep up on you when you least expect it. Okay, emotions over for today. I have been stomping around in the woods, laughing and crying and talking to myself as one does, and it occurred to me I haven't yet even shown you guys around really, at least not the other cabin. Isn't this cute? Fuck, it's pretty out here, by the way. At risk of stating the obvious. Really nice to get up here. There's a fire. Didn't seem to do any structural damage. Haunted as shit though, jam-packed with ghosts every corner. Ghost there, possible ghost orb there. Ghost window. Ghost beer. Don't let those ghosts haunt you with their mournful yet still jazzy ghost ballads. Kind of genre-defying. Feels good to be done with the crying stage and the laughing stage, which you guys missed earlier, during which time I thought a Djibouti Dubs video of 1960 Spider-Man was the funniest shit in the world. Now we're into the come down, which is a fruitful time for ideation and probably the best opportunity to give you guys my 2 cents on the OceanGate submersible disaster you've been asking for. Spoiler alert, it's going to be a lot of stuff people have already said. I'm going to try to focus on the stuff that's different from what other people have already commented on. One of the things is that everybody focused on the game controller. I think just because they weren't expecting to see that in a submersible. That's actually quite commonplace. Economies of scale have made the quality that you get in an X-Bone controller for the price you pay absolutely superb, that ratio. So they're actually used by the military. Naval commanders use them for ROVs and whatnot on submarines. That's not out of the ordinary at all. I mean, it was like a $13 Logitech that you would keep just to give to your little brothers and not even plug it in so he can pretend to be playing with you. But the fact that it was a controller wasn't the issue. It would have been funnier if it was Mad Catz. I don't know why, but it would. I think carbon fiber is what I wanted to mostly focus on, because it is insane that he made a submersible hull out of carbon fiber and didn't expect this to happen. Or even that it lasted as long as it did. It's shocking to me that they went down there like 12 times and he heard splintering in the hull on prior dives and just kept going. That's nuts. Carbon fiber hulls are like balloons. They have great strength from when you expand from the inside. They might make a decent like space capsule, although that you wouldn't use it for space capsule for the same reason that the airline industry has abandoned it as a structural material in airliners. More on that in a bit. But it doesn't really have compressive strength, and the bigger issue is that if there's one flaw with it, you have to throw the whole thing out because it's a ticking time bomb. Carbon fiber, I mean, is not a material anyone chooses. It's a material that's forced upon them by the constraints of the project. They're willing to overlook its severe downsides and limitations because of its two big strengths, being very strong and very light. That's made it kind of a novelty for a while. You see like carbon fiber print phone cases and whatnot. That's going to look really funny in retrospect to future generations, in the same way that we look back and smile at like 1950s Home of the Future videos where they talk about how proud they are that they have plastic furniture. Because Bakelite plastic furniture was a premium item when plastic was new. It was the thing to have, but way before plastic lawn furniture was just the de facto white trash lawn decoration. It's a devil's bargain, carbon fiber, and now I'm sure you can understand why, despite the drive to constantly reduce payload weight, it's not been used in any crew-rated spacecraft that I'm aware of. Also, predictably, a lot of disaster porn type commentary about what they experienced, or I guess didn't experience, being that implosion happens so quickly that images can't reach your brain from your eyes. So even from a sensory standpoint, you can't even you don't become aware that anything is happening by the time you're dead. Some were saying even that air was compressed inside the collapsing hull so rapid that it ignited, like the fuel air mixture in an engine. So they were crushed and burnt, and I guess then sodomized by demons and then cheated on with those same demons. And then the IRS audited them. I mean, it just keeps getting worse. It beggars belief. That's how it was, though. Also, just the whole sub narrative. Remember when people were holding out hope they could still be alive? And initially it was like, wow, I hope they're alive. And then it started to slowly dawn on people what that would mean. Slowly asphyxiating and freezing to death at the bottom of the sea instead of a quick, merciful end. And then they're like, wow, actually, I take that back. I hope they're dead. The deep sea is not a place where good things happen to humans. We're not really supposed to be there, but we insist on forcing ourselves into places we shouldn't go. Space, the South Pole, the oceans, even as they continually try to push us out, we just don't seem to get the message. This may surprise you, but I would not want to go that deep. If I were offered the opportunity to, I might, just because I don't get the chance to go on subs that often. I see no attraction to it, though. There's fucking nothing to see down there. Basically below about 300 feet. There's no sunlight from the surface, and it's just a desert. Most of the ocean floor is featureless desert with weird fish that seem like they probably have a incel blog or something, looking at you with their bug-eyed Steve Buscemi faces. Plus, the engineering tolerances required to go that deep are just insane. I want to say just don't send humans there. That's what Bob Ballard concluded when he was looking at hydrothermal vents. The first time anyone had directly sighted them in the 70s aboard Alvin. And he was peering through a porthole, and he couldn't get a good look at them. And so he looked up at the TV monitor inside the sub, which was feeding from the outside cameras instead, because it gave him a better perspective. And he thought to himself, well, if I can see it better on the monitor than through the porthole, what am I doing down here? Why would I not just send a robot? And the answer to that is that they do. They send loads of robots, and this surprises a lot of people. They didn't even know it was happening, because nobody fucking cares when you send a robot. If you send a human being, suddenly there's danger involved, and everybody starts paying attention. It's like the same reason people watch NASCAR. Nobody likes to watch a bunch of cars turn left over and over. But if you dangle a human life in the balance, you get a lot of interested parties watching all of a sudden. So I almost want to say the spearhead of human exploration, whether it's underwater or in space, has to have a man in a can, like a living human being inside of a capsule of some kind, directly looking at what he's discovering with his bare eye through glass. Otherwise, you lose a lot of engagement with the public. For my money, though, the shallow tropical sea is where it's at. It's not that I don't want to be underwater. You guys know better than that. It's just I'm selective about what water I want to be in and how deep I want to go. Shallow tropics are just sublime. That's what dolphins get to enjoy all the time, just fucking flipping and flapping around and not being taxed and not contributing to the economy. Goddamn untaxable dolphins, enjoying as their birthright what it takes humans a lifetime of savings to afford to be able to do, which is to just drag our fat, wrinkly bodies out onto the beach and then into the surf and just enjoy that bathwater temperature. People who flatter me too much tell me that everything I'm doing with hamsters is going to be valuable one day. I don't think so. I'm just retreading well-worn ground, recreating in miniature experiments that were already done in the 60s and 70s. I don't know what I could do with what I've learned except to make underwater condos for rich people. Which, amusingly enough, you run the numbers compared to what a mansion costs on the coast in a tropical region, like, say, Miami or something. It could be cheaper to build underwater if it was legal to. Aquarius Reef Base costs, I think, $5.5 million. That's where it's at, not the ice-cold, alien, strange, deep ocean, but the warm, inviting tropical shallows. It's just a utopian playland where you can swim and float dip beneath the surface and come up inside of a moon pool and not have to worry about decompression because you're only like 22 feet deep. And you can just lounge up out of water for a time, gazing out through a big window at the rippling ocean's surface overhead as seen from beneath it. And being that shallow, light from the surface, as filtered by seawater, casts the most entrancing patterns into your habitat, onto the floor, or just onto the sand outside. I'm sure you've seen what I'm talking about if you've been to an aquarium that has those glass tubes you can walk through. Imagine that in your living room all the time. If you want to fantasize about stuff like that you'll never be able to afford, like me, go over to U-Boat Works. U-Boat Works makes the most sleek, sci-fi looking submersibles. They make the first mass-produced assembly line submersible in the world. It looks like an underwater Tesla. It's not like Gaben's sub, which is something a lot of other people were talking about. How there's just a handful of vessels in the world, DSVs, that are rated for those kinds of depths, and I think there's only 2 currently in existence able to reach full ocean depth, including trenches, and one of them is Deep Sea Challenger, which James Cameron owns and I believe is in a museum now, and the other is a DSV Limiting Factor, which was sold by Mr. Vescova, I forget his first name, to Gabe Newell, based Papa Gaben. He, for some reason, felt it necessary to own the only still operational 2-seater full ocean depth submersible. What does he know that we don't? What's down there? I mean, the big oceanic pharmaceutical discovery everyone knows about is horseshoe crab blood, that weird blue milk shit looks like what Luke was drinking in one of those shitty new Star Wars films. $18,000 a quart because we can't synthesize it, and it curdles in the presence of impurities in pharmaceuticals. So, gotta have that stuff, so now we run vampire farms where we bleed those little fuckers dry. Shark cartilage was a big one that disappointed a lot of people. For a while it looked like it was useful in treating cancer. That went nowhere. That was fool's gold. What keeps me up at night is oceanic psychedelics, though. Because you just know, given how many species of terrestrial plants and fungal whatnots have psychedelic properties, there's got to be something in the ocean that does, too, that we haven't found yet. Yeah, I'm jelly of Gaben's sub. There, I said it. What? If I remember right, it's a titanium cruise sphere, like the new Alvin. Alvin got a new cruise sphere a couple years back, which expanded it pretty significantly, more legroom, and it changed from steel to titanium. Titanium doesn't have the best compressive strength. There are special types of steel. There's like HY80 that we use on our SSGNs. There's also HY90 and 130. I don't think we use 130 for subs because I don't think you can weld it or something. The Ruskies have their own that they used in the mirror submersibles. Probably if we got a hold of it and looked at it under a microscope, we'd find it looks awfully suspiciously similar to HY80 though. It's just a hunch. What's good about titanium though is it's inert chemically. So you can put it into a bioactive medium like seawater where everything tries to grow on and corrode your hull, and it's safe from corrosion for repeated dives into perpetuity. Whereas the same can't be said of steel, even though it has, in some formulations, superior compressive strength. Jump cut. Don't worry, I'm still the same me. I'm just inside now. I think I'm still the same me. It's the me that I always was. Okay, good, just checking. Anyways, what people forget about the deep ocean as an environment to engineer for is that it's bioactive. Everybody knows about the pressures and the freezing temperatures and the corrosion. They forget that it's full of living things that want to grow in your hull and cover up your cameras and foul your propellers. Other than that, it's a lot like a mirror image of designing for space. The hard part is getting the space capsule up into orbit. After that, the vehicle itself is comparatively trivial. It just has to withstand a pressure difference of 14.7 psi, which is sea level single atmosphere, and be radiation shielded. Whereas the deep sea equivalent, getting it there is the easy part. You don't need a big expensive rocket, you can just sink it. The hard part of that is not overcoming gravity pulling you down, but overcoming buoyancy pulling you upwards. Then once you're down there, you need a mathematically perfect spherical hull. I think limiting factors is like 0.993% mathematically flawless. Don't mean to anthropomorphize water and like imply it's intelligent and out to get you, but it's trying to get inside any way it can, and it will find any crevice that it can work the hull apart from, even if you overlooked it. You don't need to be aware of it for it to kill you. And in fact, if it does kill you, you probably will never be aware of it. At depths like that, before acrylic was in wide use, interesting exotic materials were used, like sapphire was, I believe, used in one of the layers of the Trieste. Even now that we have acrylic, and acrylic is fit for purpose, if you wanted to make like big dome windows or something in a full ocean depth rated submersible, you wouldn't probably do that with acrylic, even though I think the engineering works out. That's what Triton Subs was trying to do back in 2012 and gave up on it. You could maybe do it with spinel. I don't know if you're familiar with transparent spinel's properties. It's one of those things where carbon nanotubules, we can make small amounts, but we're not really good at making big single pieces out of it yet. If something changed, like molecular assemblers or what have you, it became economical to make big pieces out of spinel, you could have underwater tunnels that would be transparent, unlike the concrete ones we have now, and a bomb could go off inside of them and it wouldn't damage the tunnel. Anyway, rip in pieces to the OceanGate crew. I don't know what to tell you. The warning signs were there. It hurts me more than anyone. I mean, not as badly as them for like a split second, but I really wanted OceanGate to be the SpaceX of the underwater world. It looks like that's not going to be the case. Stockton Rush was, I think I mentioned earlier, trying to leverage his carbon fiber submersible towards deep sea mining somehow. I don't know how that would have worked. That guy's thought processes are difficult to piece together in retrospect, quite like his body. I guess that means that there's still an opening for somebody to be the SpaceX of the ocean. I'm not sure what they would do. There are already DSVs with full ocean depth capability that are in operation and being leveraged for scientific use. I guess deep sea mining. What can you really do that's sexy in that area? All the mining is done by robots on long tethers. The Chinese government wants to operate the robots from a sub because if you're doing it in the North China Sea, you can't really do it from a boat because the surface weather is really violent. So you put the robot operators on a sub and you only have to go about 200 feet down and just hover there. No storm can touch you. It's neutral buoyancy. It's like an underwater space station, neither floating nor sinking, and just using computer-guided thrusters to constantly maintain position. Something people don't think about with underwater habitats too. You could have one that doesn't. It could just hover in the water column, have like docking collars on all sides of it. It's sort of like pseudo microgravity. Things only weigh as much as you want to underwater if they're full of air, because you are the one who has to ballast them, so you decide how much or little ballast to use. That's why depictions of underwater buildings in fiction with like supports make me laugh, because they don't need supports, they need restraints. You don't need like pillars holding up your underwater buildings, you need chains holding them down. They could just be suspended from chains like big metal balloons, because that's what they are. Reminds me of bullshit acid wisdom I got on a trip like this. I think I was in the ape cave. I was underground for this one. And the acid voices told me, blimps are like sky submarines, and birds are like skyfish in the ocean of air that we all live at the bottom of. I was like, kind of? I mean, you're not wrong, but I paid $60 on you, and I'm frankly expecting better, or I'm going to flush the rest. That's most of what acid produces, actually, is ideas that are an interesting change of perspective that aren't really useful. They're not wrong isms that you don't know what to do with or that don't really have a logical or appropriate use. You could invest into and expand mariculture, offshore farming of fish and other edible sea life. But those big floating pens, heavy enough that you could use the structure itself to ballast a habitat at the bottom with big acrylic windows looking out into the sea that would house divers that would harvest your fish, that would pick out the elderly and sick ones, that would do basic inspection and maintenance of the net and effect repairs if necessary. That's one of the few areas where saturation diving can be of some benefit in the commercial sector besides the oil and gas industry. Well, experiment concluded. We're at the end of the day's useful sunshine, and battery charged to 44%. Not too bad for being in a heavily wooded area with tree cover. That's not to full, which would have been ideal, but it's entirely sufficient to cook this evening's meal and to power my heated blanket into the night. For those of you wondering, I have tested this in a setting without any tree cover, and it takes about 5 hours, almost exactly, of direct summer sunshine to go from 0 to full on this battery. This is a 500 watt hour battery, and this is a 102 watt panel. That math just about neatly checks out. Sun descends, thus ending day 2 in the ghost house, and beginning another night of IRL Darkwood roleplay. Except I'm not allowed to use the generator. Here's what I am allowed to use. I thought this was really cute and kind of absurd. The idea of a light switch you can pull out of your pocket and slap on the wall and then turn it on and it makes light anyway. Well, normally it's connected to all these other dependencies. In order to create light, it can't do that by itself. Not this one. This one makes its own light. It has everything inside that it needs to do that. I should be more like this light switch.